All right, so today we are talking about continuous data and frequency tables. So if you remember, continuous data is data that is given across a range as opposed to a specific set of values. So if we are looking at this table right here, this is basically telling us that from 50 on there are 2 people, 60 on there are 7, etc. So basically there are 2 people between 50 and 60, 7 between 60 and 70, 9 between 70 and 80, and so forth. So of course in a frequency table we would demonstrate that like this, where we list out our numbers and then the bars sort of stretch from the starting and ending point of each interval, and then they go up as high as whatever the frequency is. So the frequency table that we're looking at on the left is the same as the histogram that is presented on the right. Alright, so let's look at this example. It says how many seedlings do we have that are 400 millimeters or more? So 400 is here, 425 and up is here, so if we put those guys together, that would tell us that we have 20 seedlings. Alright, what percentage of seedlings are between 349 and 400? So 349, so if the next number up would be 350, right? So then we would go to 400, which is down here. So basically we're going to count all 3 of these. We're going to add those guys up to get 84. Now it says percentage. So that means we need to divide that by the total that were measured. So if we add up our total, we measured 120 seedlings. So 84 out of 120 is going to give us 0.7, which is 70%. Okay, so again, that was just what we measured, so that would be called our population. Or sorry, the sample. The population is the total in the entire nursery. So if we're talking about samples versus population, this is what we mean. So we want to estimate the total population that is less than 400. So if I count up in my sample, if I'm taking less than 400, it's basically everything except those final 6. So there were 114 out of the 120 that were less than 400. Which is 95%. So if I'm translating that to the entire population, I'm just going to take 95% of 1,462, so 0.95 times 1,462. And that should give us about 1,389. So we can do the same thing for the next example. So between 374 and 425. So basically between those, so the cutoff is 425, so we only want this. It tells us there's 42 in our population out of the 120. It's 35%. So if I do 0.35 times the total population, it should give me my estimate. So it's going to be about 512. All right. So the next thing we want to talk about is cumulative frequency. So cumulative frequency basically tells us the frequency of whatever range we're looking at plus whatever came before. So your overall cumulative frequency is always going to wind up adding up to the total number of things that you surveyed or that you sampled. So in this case, we did 80 people as our sample. We're going to have our data, number of guests, and the frequency based on the number of days is in our table. We want to show the cumulative frequency for each class interval. So whenever you split your data into groups, those are called classes. So the classes here would be 1 through 10, 11 through 20, and so on. So since we already have the table, I'm just going to make another column over here and give my numbers. So the first one's easy. Next one, I'm just going to add up what we have so far. So if I combine the 8 and the 11, that's 19. If I combine that with the 14, that's 33. Then with the 17, gets me up to 50. I know it's not lining up perfectly, but bear with me. And we have 70, 79, 86, something got off. And finally, 90. So, that means there were a total of 90 days that we used for our sample. Okay. So to construct a histogram, draw out data. So we went from 1 to 10 all the way up to 80. So we have 1, 10, 20, 30, 50, 60, 70, and 80. And on our y-axis, we're going to draw the bars. For the sake of doing it, we're going to go, we had 8 for the first group. Then we had 11 for the next group. Then it was 14. Let's be a little bit higher. Then 17, 20, 9, then 7, and then 4. Go ahead and write those numbers just to keep track, since it will make more sense than trying to make the scale. Whoops. Okay, so that is our histogram. Find the frequency polygon, what we're going to do is make a line that connects the midpoints of each of the tops of these boxes so that we get a little graph. It should look something like that. Okay, so to make the cumulative frequency polygon, what we're going to do is do the same thing we just did, only we're using the numbers from our cumulative frequency little graph. So this time we're going to start at 8. We're going to go up to, oops, just going to scoot that point over a little bit. Let's make it there. Again, my picture is not going to be exact. Basically, it's going to keep scaling up. But what we should notice is that when we hit the 60, it starts to kind of flatten out a little bit. So again, mine is not going to be perfect, nor is it going to be exact. But it's getting a little flatter. And so if we were doing this out using our scale, right, we know that the top of our graph would be that 90, and it should pretty much always line up with whatever our last dot is. Okay. So when did we have 30 or fewer guests? So we're going to basically look at our data. And so if we look at our cumulative frequency, we had 30 guests on this third row. So there were 33 days where we had 30 or fewer guests. Number of nights in which the motel had less than 45 guests. Again, we don't have 45 on our range. 45 is the midpoint over here. So we're just going to take the 70 and count it down, because if you have between 41 and 50 on average, you have about 45. There we go. Okay, so the motel will break even if it has less than 30 guests for no more than 25% of the time. So if there were 90 total days and we had 33 days of less than 30 guests, that will give us our percentage. So it's going to be about 37%. So did they break even? No. All right, that's all we have for today. I'll see you next time.